All right, everybody, here we go with the notes for Chapter 5. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence this time around. Hard sell techniques of old were okay for one-encounter sales of low-cost items, but are largely responsible for the bad reputations that salespeople tend to have today. So we definitely see this when we think about the stereotypical salesperson. They've had a reputation that has carried from decade to decade to decade, even though there have been different approaches to selling ever since those reputations have manifested themselves. Rather than being seen as the manipulators and hard closers of the past, media salespeople need to be perceived as trusted and respected partners who provide insights and get results for their customers. So moving away from that stereotypical sort of thing and creating this culture where salespeople are not seen as the the irritants or the slime balls that some folks make them out to be. Media salespeople have to be able to analyze data in order to come up with insights and solutions, and to educate prospects about the benefits of their product. So we've been talking about this throughout the course, that we're moving away from this idea of sellers that are going to sell and they do presentations as much as they're trying to educate people that they're trying to sell to, and actually show that they are working in the best interest of the client to help them to be able to come up with the answers to various problems that that client may have in his or her business. Now, selling is educating. Establishing mutual trust is the first step for a successful digital era selling as educating model, which in turn requires salespeople to have emotional intelligence in order to develop trusting relationships. And we're going to go into what emotional intelligence is. One definition from Howard Gardner: the ability to solve problems or to create products that are valued within one or more cultural settings. So this idea of emotional intelligence, this goes beyond what would normally be looked at when we think of IQ, intelligence quotient. We're actually talking here about EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. Those two terms could pretty much be interchanged with each other, emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. It's more about not just what you know, but what you do with what you know, how you apply your knowledge, both in an intellectual sense and in kind of a social and emotional sort of sense. Now, here's some factors of intelligence that we tend to take a look at, and there's actually 7 here that Howard Gardner is known for, and then there's a few more that are kind of debatable. They're ones that Howard Gardner had come up with, but even he's not 100% sold on whether they should be included in the list. But for our discussion, we'll include them here. First off, linguistic intelligence. This is the idea of using words well. How well are you able to string sentences and thoughts together and make them coherent? Logical and mathematical. You're good with reasoning, with patterns, with logic, that sort of thing. Musical intelligence. You're good with patterns and rhythms and sounds, and more of an artistic sort of sense than in the mathematical sense. The bodily kinesthetic aspect of intelligence is one that is good with body movement, with physical control. Spatial intelligence, that is somebody that is good with directions, maps, and charts. And we also include the audio-visual in here. Those that are able to kind of follow along with what is seen with what is heard. So that's kind of where all of that blends together. Interpersonal intelligence. This person can understand emotions and motivations. They can interact with others well. You might think of it as someone that has decent social skills. Intrapersonal. So not interpersonal, intrapersonal. This is someone that's good at being self-aware, that's more introspective. We might accuse these people of being introverts. So those are the 7, and now we're going to get into some of the other ones. Howard Gardner has suggested, but there's a bit of dispute, either from Howard Gardner himself or from others in the psychological community, that debate whether or not these really are facets of intelligence. The first one here, the naturalist. The naturalist is somebody that's keenly in tune with the environment, is able to connect with nature and those sorts of things. Then there's the spiritual facet, someone that has faith in something in a mystical or a religious sort of way, something that basically focuses on something that is outside of humanity in those sort of senses. Existential, desiring to find meaning in our lives. You could kind of relate this to the spiritual, but it's much more philosophical in scope. If you've taken any philosophy courses, you've heard the term metaphysics. Basically, questions revolving around why and what is real and all those sorts of things. And then there's another one that has been suggested. This one's not in the book. There's moral intelligence, having an ability to discern ethics. So you can see where these 3 on this page kind of have somewhat of a relationship with each other, but because of the disagreement going on with those, some people accept these as facets of intelligence and some people do not. Now, Daniel Goleman, talking about emotional intelligence specifically. So here's his definition. Emotional intelligence is the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, and for managing emotions well in ourselves and in our relationships. So it's having that sense of kind of realizing where we are in things that we might not necessarily categorize as quote unquote rational, and being able to perceive that in others as well, and having a bit of discernment as to what to do with those things. So let's talk about 4 different dimensions of emotional intelligence, or EQ. These, by the way, are listed in your textbook. Check out Exhibit 5.1 for greater detail on these things. He breaks them down into 2 different major arenas. The first one we're going to talk about is personal competence. So these things are going to be capabilities that determine how we manage ourselves. And the first one within personal competence is self-awareness. And you see some of the facets here that go under self-awareness. There's emotional self-awareness, and accurate self-assessment, and self-competence. So these are things that very much have to deal with knowing what you do well, what sort of things are your limitations or your weaknesses, ways that you're able to have a certain feeling or sense about things, using your gut, having a hunch, your spidey senses tingling, whatever the way that you want to describe that. And also, the self-confidence one is really important, because there's that sense of knowing what you can do well, having a sense of self-worth when it comes to those things, having self-worth in general. All of that under the area of self-awareness. Now, the other thing under personal competence would be self-management. And there's several things that we can talk about in this arena. First off, there's emotional self-control. Whenever you want to act or react to something, that you're able to pause and try to not make things a spectacle or make things worse than what they are. There's transparency, displaying honesty and integrity, having a sense of trustworthiness about yourself. Also, within self-management, adaptability, There's flexibility in adapting to changing situations, overcoming obstacles, having that sense of being able to pivot. There's the aspect of achievement, that you have this sense that you want to accomplish something, or that you want to do something and do it well, and you have that ability to set those goals for yourself and to strive for those goals. Initiative, readiness to act and seize opportunity, acting on self-discipline. Also having a sense of optimism, in the words of the great philosophers at Monty Python, always looking on the bright side of life, trying to find the positive things in the situations that you're in. So that is personal competence. And now let's talk about a couple of things under social competence, how we manage relationships. First, there's social awareness. And under social awareness, we have these three traits: empathy, organizational awareness, and service. So in empathy, we sometimes confuse empathy with sympathy. We can have empathy without being sympathetic. They're related to each other, but not necessarily one and the same. To be an empath would be to be somebody that has a sort of more than just casual interest in somebody and in their interests. Organizational awareness, knowing how things work within different constructs and structures and those sorts of things. And having the ability to serve, to be able to meet the needs of those that you encounter. From social awareness, we go to relationship management. Again, several items under this particular category. First off, inspirational leadership. Being able to have a compelling vision, and to be able to bring others alongside you. That's inspirational leadership. Then influence, being able to use different tactics of persuasion, being able to have someone see and recognize your particular point of view. Developing others, being able to empower others, giving people guidance and feedback, helping them to improve themselves. Change catalyst, being able to try to lead yourself and to lead others into a different direction from what had been going on. Conflict management, resolving disagreements. That one is a huge one when it comes to trying to bring people together that have different points of view. The ability to resolve a situation, maybe perhaps find some sort of compromise, that sort of thing. And then teamwork and collaboration, cooperation and team building, very important in relationship management. So now, we've talked about these things, but how important is emotional intelligence as a whole when it comes to selling? Now, Goldman says at best, IQ, intelligence quotient, contributes about 20% to the factors that determine life success. According to a study from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, relationship skills were more important for success than grades. So we're seeing here this kind of idea that just because you're very knowledgeable, because you have the facts straight, it's helpful, but it is far from being the only thing that you need in order to succeed. Having the correct information, being right about things, knowing how to do things the right way is one thing. But being able to carry that over and use that knowledge in ways that you can interact with people and lead people, guide people along with you, that is a completely different skill set and goes above and beyond just having knowledge. One of the major elements of success related to all this is optimism. A study at MetLife Insurance showed that new salesmen who were by nature optimists sold 37% more insurance in their first 2 years on the job than pessimists did. If you don't have that sense of positivity, if you don't have that ability to look on the bright side of life, if you don't have that ability to have a sense of self-encouragement, self-determination, it can really be detrimental to your success as a salesperson, because as that beats up on you in an emotional sort of way, that beat up sort of stance is going to show when you try to interact with people. And it's something that can be a distraction or, quite honestly, a turnoff. It's not necessarily fair, but it's kind of the way that we tend to interact in a social world. That's why it's not necessarily a good thing to be called a Debbie Downer. If you have the ability to have a sense of hope and purpose in the middle of things where you're going to come in contact with a lot of negativity, with even a certain amount of aggravation from other people, and you can, let that roll off your shoulder and not dwell on those things. It's going to take you a long way into being much more successful, not just in the sales world, but in many different other aspects of professional life. So with that, we're going to take a break, and we will carry on with the chapter over in the next video.